Okay, picture this. It's May 2025, Syria, a country that's been through, well, years of conflict, sanctions, just immense hardship. But now things seem to be shifting. The U.S. is starting to lift sanctions. World Bank debts are cleared. You get this feeling. Maybe a new chapter.
Absolutely. It really does feel like a potential turning point, moving away from that deep isolation towards hopefully some real recovery.
And that's exactly what we want to unpack for you today. This is our deep dive into Syria after sanctions. We'll look at the big changes happening, the opportunities popping up, but also the challenges that are still very much there, and maybe some strategic possibilities. Our aim here is pretty simple. Give you a clear, solid understanding of this complex situation, without getting bogged down in every single detail.
Right. And to do that, we're drawing on some really solid analysis. There's Dr. Pooyan Ghamari's report, Syria After Sanctions, Renewal, Risk, and Opportunity. That's kind of our anchor. But we're also pulling in insights from another analysis, Syria, Opportunities and Challenges After Sanctions, plus reporting from places like Reuters, AP News, Human Rights Watch, and Relief Web for the crucial humanitarian picture.
Right, the ground truth.
Exactly. And even legal analysis from Foley Hoag on the tricky details of sanctions policy itself.
So a good mix of sources. Our mission, then, is to pull out the most important stuff from all of these so you get a really comprehensive picture of where Syria might be headed.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's dive in. What are the biggest transformations actually underway right now? What are we seeing on the ground?
Well, what's really striking is that it's not just one thing. It's not just sanctions lifting. It feels more like a fundamental rethink happening.
A rethink? How so? Give us some examples.
Okay, politically, the big one is the formation of a transitional government. That's a huge signal, right? An intention to move on from the immediate past. But it's more than just who's in charge. There are hints about redesigning national symbols, maybe shifting state contracts towards international partners. Small things, maybe, but they suggest trying to reimagine what the Syrian state even is.
That definitely points to a shift in mindset. And it's not just internal, is it? We're seeing moves internationally, too.
Oh, absolutely. The renewed talks with the U.S., with multilateral groups, that's key, but also restoring ties with countries like South Korea. And the sources mention this interesting possibility. Syria may be exploring joining something like the Abraham Accords.
Wow, okay. That would be a massive regional shift if it happened.
Huge. A potential game changer for regional dynamics.
And the economy. Obviously, it's been devastated. What's happening there?
Yeah, this is critical. We're seeing kind of early efforts to stabilize the Syrian pound. It's been all over the place, as you can imagine. And there's talk about potentially overhauling the whole financial system. These are just first steps, but they're vital for creating the kind of stable base you need to attract investment, to actually benefit from sanctions lifting.
Okay, so these shifts are happening. Let's talk opportunities. With sanctions easing, what's opening up economically?
Well, the big one is foreign direct investment, FDI. Lifting sanctions basically lowers the barrier, the legal risk, a reputational risk for foreign companies.
Right.
So the analysis suggests we could see money coming in from the Gulf states, definitely from the Syrian diaspora, which is huge, and other global investors who just wouldn't touch Syria before.
And which sectors look most promising?
Energy's a big one, obviously hit hard by sanctions. Infrastructure, desperately needed. And even technology, there's potential there. For energy specifically, yes, the infrastructure is damaged, but the basic framework exists. New investment could get things moving relatively quickly, and there's regional demand.
Makes sense. You need that capital to rebuild anything. And speaking of rebuilding, the sources mentioned some big projects already, don't they?
They do. That reported $800 million deal to revitalize the Tartus port. That's significant. Tartus is a major trade gateway. And then you've got these ambitious urban projects like Marota City in Damascus, huge construction efforts. These kinds of things, they create jobs, they create demand, and they're more feasible now with funding potentially unlocked and international expertise may be coming in.
Sounds like a potential positive cycle.
Yeah.
But it's not just private money, right? International loans, aid that's back on the table, too.
Exactly. Clearing those arrears, Syria's old debts, which seems to have happened with help from regional partners, that was critical.
Okay.
Because now, theoretically, the door is open to concessional financing. Think World Bank's IDA, the International Development Association. That's low-interest loans, grants, the kind of money you need for massive rebuilding that the government just can't fund alone.
Right. The scale of destruction is just hard to grasp. And beyond money flowing in, what about trade flowing out and in?
Yeah, removing trade barriers reconnects Syria to global markets. So pathways open up for Syrian products, but just as importantly, it makes it easier to import essential goods. And it helps with people moving too. Maybe seeking work abroad, sending money back home through formal channels, which is a lifeline for so many.
And we absolutely have to talk about the Syrian diaspora here. They're a massive potential force, aren't they?
Huge, absolutely huge. It's not just the money they could invest, though that's significant. It's the skills, the entrepreneurial spirit, the experience gained abroad. If the outlook improves, if there's more stability, you might see more of these skilled people, these business owners, thinking about returning, bringing back that expertise. We've seen it happen elsewhere after conflicts. Diaspora investment can be a real engine for early recovery.
So definitely some hopeful signs, a lot of potential.
Gosh.
But, and it's a big but, the sources are very clear about the massive challenges that remain.
And this is crucial to understand. Despite the optimism, what are the deep-seated problems? Well, first and foremost, the sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis. You mentioned over 90% of people below the poverty line. That means urgent, desperate need for basics. Electricity, clean water, healthcare, food. Economic recovery takes time. These needs are now.
The human cost is just devastating. And layered on top of that is the physical destruction.
Exactly. The infrastructure deficit is profound. It's not just bombed out buildings. It's power grids that don't work, roads that are impassable, hospitals that lack everything. Rebuilding this, it needs money, yes, but also serious project management, coordination.
And institutions to manage it all.
Right. And that leads to the governance complexities. Try and integrate all these different political factions, ethnic groups into a stable government. That's incredibly difficult. If they can't build consensus, things could easily become unstable again.
A very fragile situation. And even with the main sanctions gone, it sounds like there are still legal tripwires for businesses.
That's right. The broad sanctions might be easing, but targeted ones on specific people, specific entities, those could very well remain.
Yeah.
So any business, any investor needs to do their homework. Really careful legal due diligence. Know who you're dealing with, make sure you're compliant. It's not a totally clean slate overnight.
Gotcha. And beyond the physical and political, there are the social wounds.
Deep ones. Millions displaced internally and as refugees. Supporting their return when and if it's safe and voluntary. Dealing with the trauma. Trying to foster reconciliation between communities that have been pitted against each other. That's maybe the hardest part, but essential for any kind of long-term stability.
These are massive hurdles.
Yep.
So looking forward, what are the sources suggesting as key areas to focus on for the government, international players, businesses, everyone involved?
The analyses point to a few core areas, obviously accelerated infrastructure development, roads, power, water, housing, get the basics running.
Make sense?
Fostering partnerships between international companies and Syrian businesses, joint ventures, supporting smaller enterprises. That could drive investment.
Okay.
Investing in people, education, job training, reskilling, building transparent and accountable governance, fighting corruption, clear legal rules, that's vital for confidence.
Right.
Supporting social cohesion, reconciliation efforts, community rebuilding, making regulations more agile, easier to navigate for businesses, driving digital transformation, e-government, fintech, and prioritizing environmental sustainability in the rebuild.
It's a really comprehensive list.
Yeah.
It's not just one magic bullet.
Not at all. It has to be holistic, balancing the immediate human needs with long-term development, building bridges between different groups, pushing for transparency, and trying really hard not to fall back into old patterns of instability or corruption.
So for you, our listener, trying to process all this, let's maybe tackle some questions you might have. Where are the most promising sectors if you're looking at opportunities?
Yeah, good question. If you connect it back to basic needs and growth potential, energy is fundamental. Can't do much without power.
So true.
Infrastructure, roads, ports, housing that affects everyone in every business. Technology has huge potential for leapfrogging and connecting people. And then, of course, healthcare and education are just essential for the long-term health of the society.
And the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
What about real stability? Lasting peace?
Look, the transitional government says it's committed. That's a start. But real sustainable peace, that depends entirely on whether they can govern inclusively, bring everyone in, manage security, and actually push forward with reconciliation. It's a long road. No guarantees.
And if someone was considering getting involved investing, maybe what are the big risks they need to keep front of mind?
Okay, definitely still some legal uncertainty around any remaining targeted sanctions. Navigating the bureaucracy could be complex, ongoing security risks in some areas, and the potential for corruption or disputes, especially around things like property rights. You need your eyes wide open.
We mentioned currency reforms earlier. How vital is getting that right for the average person, for businesses?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Stable currency, controlled inflation that directly impacts people's ability to afford basic goods. It builds confidence for businesses too. If it's handled badly or without transparency, it could really undermine the whole recovery.
And the diaspora, they seem like such a potential positive force here.
They really do. It's investment, yes,
Yeah.
but also starting businesses, bringing back skills learned elsewhere, fostering connections. Their advocacy internationally can also be powerful. They're a huge asset.
And it sounds like we'll probably see a mix of public and private efforts in the rebuilding.
Yeah, the expectation is definitely for public-private partnerships, PPPs,
Yeah.
especially for the big infrastructure stuff, combining government oversight or resources with private sector cash and know-how.
And you mentioned the humanitarian crisis. It's good to know that won't just be forgotten in the rush to rebuild.
It absolutely can't be. Addressing those immediate needs, food, water, shelter, healthcare, requires ongoing coordinated effort from aid groups, the UN, the government. The key is integrating that relief work with the longer-term development plans so they support each other.
Those social divisions, though, such a huge barrier. How does a country even start to heal those?
It's incredibly tough. It needs real effort to address grievances on all sides, community-level reconciliation work, making sure resources and opportunities are shared fairly. If that social cohesion doesn't improve, it makes everything harder. Refugee return, security, everything.
And the fear, maybe, of sliding back into authoritarianism. How is that avoided?
That really comes down to building strong, transparent institutions that people trust, empowering civil society groups outside the government to hold power accountable, and reforming the security sector, making sure it's under civilian control. Those are the kind of safeguards you need for a more stable, predictable future.
Finally, what about Syria rejoining the world stage? What's the outlook there?
It looks promising, actually. Getting back into the Arab League was a big step. Renewed talks with Western Asian countries. If Syria continues internal reforms, stabilizes the economy, helps with regional security, that strengthens its position, opens more doors for cooperation, both political and economic.
So wrapping this up, it really feels like Syria is at a genuine crossroads now that sanctions are lifting, huge potential, real opportunities starting to surface, but balanced against these incredibly deep, persistent challenges.
That sums it up perfectly, I think. It's complex. It's going to need really careful handling, smart partnerships, and a real focus on long-term stability and making sure all Syrians benefit.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of this incredibly complicated situation and some useful insights into where Syria might be heading.
Yeah, and maybe something to think about is just how interconnected everything is. The politics, the economy, the social fabric, how those threads weave together will really shape Syria's future. And, what role can the international community constructively play in helping foster a positive path forward? Definitely something worth keeping an eye on.